Today's project is going to be putting the power locks or remote locks on the Rubicon. I probably should replace this little piece eventually too. This is a makeshift mirror, works really well, it's cheap, about $5-10 bucks. The Blue Jeep already has electric remote doors, so you can, oh I just locked it, whoops, my bad. So you can get in and out of it, opens, closes. I did put, and I just pulled this down so you can see it. I haven't finished this one. These wires need to be taped up just like this, and sealed, and then tucked up and pinned up and under the dash there. But these have a 2-pin trailer release. You can buy them at any auto parts store just like that. You can pop the door off, and now the door can be removed with its auto locks, so the vehicle doesn't have to have any weird modifications if you decide to go doorless. And that is on both sides. This side actually has a different pin connector. It's kind of hard to see. I'll have to go over there and pull it down for you, but it's a 5-pin connector because I got a central locking kit because I eventually want to do the trunk. Once you remove all of the screws, the 2 from the handle, which once those ones are removed, don't put any weight or pull on this handle because you'll move it out of its place. There's 1 on the side over here and 2 on the bottom. The 2 over here with the retaining strap can be left in, as well as the 1 behind the door hinge here, or the opener. Those now have been removed. It's only plastic clips, which require 2 tools for the next 2 steps. This thing will wedge behind the door and pop those little plastic clips open. So this just kind of feeds behind the plastic, and you do make plastic ones of these so you don't scratch your paint. I'm not that worried about it, but this goes behind there and pops those off. And then you need a specialty tool. I recommend getting one at least for the spring behind the door window roller. This is it. The tool I'm using, the black one for the trim, and this one with some other ones were from Harbor Freight for I think $4. It's a worthwhile investment so you don't break any parts. To remove the door window roller, use this little tool here, and it goes in line with the door handle, or the door window roller, and you'll feel it click through, and at that point you should be able to pull this off. And the spring clip stays inside it and nothing gets broken, bent, or otherwise. So that's why that tool is very useful. As I'm narrating this, you can probably hear my Basenji dog crying behind the fence because he can hear me talking. Hey buddy, hey, oh, and here's another one. This is the pesky plastic body retention clips. This little tool is nice because you can slide it in behind there and get around the actual clip. So you can slide until you feel one, kind of roll up and around it until you can feel your way around it, and then kind of just pop it out. And sometimes they give you a little fuss, but you got to give them a little pressure and you can feel it pop and you're good. And you go around to each one and do that. There's some sticky gum back there and a clear plastic film. Once those are all removed, then it's a delicate process to unlatch the top channel that retains the door in. So be very careful when bending it away not to snap this corner, which is stuck under this. That'll be next. Prior to part, I can kind of show you what it is. You can see the crown top of that pin inside the door. It's pretty pronounced, but the door has a clip holding it, or the inside plastic has a piece holding it to it. So this basically forks around that bottom and pulls it out of the door from that little white tip. And that allows it to come out without breaking it from this piece, which is very important to use something like this, or a technique you might know that would avoid breaking the plastic, because it's about $250 from the dealership to get the new plastic piece for your door. And that includes the weather stripping up here, so if that ever goes bad, you have to order this as a piece, 2-piece set. Now that all the plastic clips are removed, that's the part we want to lift this up and out of that channel. And again, remember not to use this handle because it's not attached anymore. So you kind of want to just pop it and slide it out. This is going to be a little bit tough because I'm only using one hand so I can demonstrate it. But I lifted it up out of that end so you can see there's a big lift on this end and it's still attached down there because of this. So I'm going to pull it out over the window roller and slide it back toward me, making sure I miss the end of the window here. And as I slide it out, now it's free of this piece, which is the part that will usually break that. Lift it up nice and easy. And I just did that with one hand, nothing broken, and it's relatively easy to do if you remove all of the pins first. That's the piece removed. I'll flip it over and hold it up so you can see the pinholes. There's one there, the bottom, then there's another one here, there, and there. And those correspond to this one, that one, that guy, and that guy. There are the two screws at the bottom as well, but that's the whole piece there. And you can see this handle has these rubberized ends with the little metal piece in it. So you don't want to pull that through because it's nicely lined up if you just leave it. And the same with the trim. Just take your time, know where your pins are, and it'll come out easy. Because taking the door panel off is kind of a pain in the butt anyway, so putting this solenoid behind here is going to require peeling this back and kind of getting in here, and you're going to destroy the weather stripping for a second. So at the same time, I'm going to be replacing the door latches as well. As you can see, they take a beating over time from salt, and no one wants to grab inside that and get rusty under your fingernail. This is actually the longest part of the project. Reaching up and behind the door is mildly difficult, but it is well worth doing and replacing. That noise you just heard was this N52 1-inch sphere magnet. I use this to pin back stuff like this plastic against the metal. So I'll peel this up and back. And with it up here, I just let the magnet go and let it hold it so I don't have to keep pulling it. And then I'll rip all these little strings out and pin it back again, but that gives me access into here without having to hold that constantly. And the magnet's strong enough that nothing will knock it down unless I pull it down. But this is the area we need to work in, and we will have to wind back up the window, so keep that crank handy by. Just set the solenoid on top of the magnet that I used to pin that back, just as the approximate placement for it, so I can actually span the wires out and see how far they have to go, as I get you a little too close here to under the cab, to be around this hinge so that when the door accidentally comes off that strap, it won't rip the wires. So I'm gonna actually place it, I would say right around there, I would say. Maybe a little bit shorter. Right there. I'll measure that out. I'm pretty sure it's 31 inches I used on the other one, but I'll check. I'm not sure that every pigtail off of the end of one of these will be the same length as one another. You want to take your measurement from the back of the device itself, and that's what I did the previous time. Measured all the way out until I got to where the vehicle's optimum distance was, which is right about here at this spot, which was 31 inches. And then I'll use that to measure the other side without having to fiddle around with it. Once I cut it here, I'll put on a little connector, or I'll put on the 5-pin trailer connector, like I did on the other one, and then I'll wire wrap the whole thing back up and through and feed it through the door assembly when I'm ready. But the most important thing to remember is, if you are going to be putting new door latches on, do this job first, because it is very difficult to reach around this once it's in the door. And that's why it's a good time to replace this while you've got the door open and there's nothing new obstructing it. So again, do this step first, the door latch. This is going to be a little bit more difficult to demonstrate due to the angles and positions that it takes to remove it. But the little pin you can see there holding that toothed part in, if you were to bend that back and let that toothed thing drop down, there's one on the opposite side as well over there. And when that happens, you can then pull that door hinge out. There's a cotter pin holding the door release arm on. So you have to remove that pin, and then this thing will come outside the vehicle, the whole handle assembly. And to reinstall, you drop those toothed clips
down from the top and then push them into those springs until they tighten on both sides evenly so that it tightens evenly.
Now I just removed the exterior door handle latch. It's no longer there. I hope you like that sound effect too. It's pretty good. Pretty accurate because this thing's pretty old and crusty. This is the cotter pin from the last one I just showed that you need to remove. Then these little guys need to come out. These are kind of a pain because they're far up in there. A lot of times you can reach up and push if they're not too crusty. Mine are pretty crusty, so I used a extremely long screwdriver. We pulled one out from the top with these extension needle nose vice grips. Use the magnet on a telescope to pick them back up out of the bed of the door, because once they fall from up in there, they just drop down in here and it's kind of a pain, and why not? They make a tool for that. And I just grabbed this little guy nearby because they're real handy. That was to pound them up from the bottom and out. So inside the door, the metal of the door would be here, and in between that metal, this would slide down from the top and pinch, so that as these go in, it tightens against the door, and there's one on each side that slide in like that. And then once you have that on there, you can actually put it in. That's the peg that holds the arm in which this cotter pin lives. But you can see these are pretty old, rusty and crusty, so they need to be replaced. Save these because your new one probably won't come with them. They're zinc plated or whatever, or I don't know what it is, some form of non-rust material, even though it is taking on rust. But yeah, they usually don't come with new ones of these, and they're perfectly fine to use again. Same with the cotter pin, unless you roached it trying to remove it, which it is actually probably the most difficult part of the whole thing to remove, to keep alive. But with those out, you can then reverse the process of putting the new one in. You push it in a little bit, attach this arm. You won't usually be able to get the cotter pin on there because you'll probably bend the arm if you were to do that. So you just want to line them up and kind of feed the new assembly in very nice and slowly, because these are really tight in there. When you push it in, it'll drag a lot. Once it's in, hold it in place and insert these pins before you put the cotter pin on. I found that to be a little bit easier, just because then if you have to move this arm around, you can. But it is fairly difficult going back in. Like I said, this is the longest part of this entire project, is the door handle. The electric locking system is extremely quick and simple compared to this. But it's, like I said, worth doing. And again, don't grease anything until you've done all the inside the door work stuff, because otherwise your arms will get pretty greasy. So everything's gonna look pretty dry as it comes out, and I'll keep it that way until the end. And then at the very end, we'll go through everything with a spray, long-lasting white lithium grease, which is great for keeping things lubricated for a long time. Now the door handle's on and secured tight. You wanna make sure that gap is really tight. Sometimes the retaining clips, even if you push them down in, they won't get it tight enough with the new one. So I actually had to make a tin shim on both sides, just like you would do like a door in a house. Just kind of fold it over a few times and then kind of wedge it under the bottom side, and then pound your pin in from the top, and that will tighten it a lot tighter than it would be without that function. That'll make sure that your handle doesn't wiggle from the door on the outside. But that's all installed. The cotter pin, I just reached up with my bare hands holding it and slid it in from the top and pushed down till it clipped, and it's in. So now, with the latch on the outside done, I can take the pre-wrapped, and I took electrical tape, wrapped the entire assembly so that you don't get as much rattling if you would go off-roading or something of wires inside the door, and you also eliminate the chance of them getting caught on things inside the door. There are 5 wires in this little braid, so it is a lot of wire for what it is, but if you keep it nice and wrapped well, it's very well organized. And then when you come back up to the unit itself, I actually continue the tape onto the unit for a couple of laps and very tightly wrap around it, and then back onto the same assembly, so the wire isn't able to pull out of the back. It'll pull on the whole assembly. Due to the change of the actual mechanism in this version, this assembly is new to the 2003 through 6, like we noted before. So it moves this control arm significantly down, which makes it so you can't actually use this original screw hole. So that'll only work in the TJ pre-2003, from what I understand. This is the hole that I started to line this geometry up. You can see the motion that this makes in and out. And then that same similar directional motion you get out of the locking mechanism. It's still a little tight because I haven't lubricated it or anything. So once I line this up to where I want it to be, I'll have another hole that I'll have to drill a little bit further behind it. And how you line that up, you just take another one of these out of the package, line up the hole from this end, and pull the actuator all the way out so they're as long as they can be that you can see, and just kind of about line them up, and put the drill bit through the hole and make a tap spot. And then start your second drill hole. Once it's in, it's very easy from there to attach the little assembly that pulls back and forth that rod. A couple of things you want to make sure. You want to make sure your wiring assembly or harness is tucked behind your window roller so that it's coming out without having any restriction to your window itself. So you can put your window down and up without any bumping or anything scraping. No wires being caught. So just make sure that before you seal everything up. And when you're drilling the holes, you also want the window to be up. Otherwise, if you punch through too rapidly, you can shatter the glass. I drill the holes with this. I know it's not the best option. I have many better drills, but because it's slow and I know that it'll make a good hole and I can do it relatively quickly, I just use these because it's safer to be slow and steady and make sure you don't bend the metal or punch through the outside of the door or the glass if you forget to put the window up. Now that the motions for each are relatively speaking in line, then extend it all the way out, make sure this is right, and then once it's in that position, make sure that's right. So they're still lined up at both ends. Then just take this, set it on that end, and make a line where it needs to be cut right before that red thing. Helps a lot if you get it really tight to that little retaining clip. So just take the tip and rest it on the little hole, and then get a Sharpie, make a line, and then I just have a little pair of bolt cutters which I'll just snip that with. So because I have one hand to work with, I couldn't show you the actual process, but you feed this down through the top there so the flat head stops, and then you bring it over here. You slide on this piece, the connector, onto this one first because it can't clip into it, it has to slide. Once it's slid on, you bring it up and bring it down over the top of this one here till it clicks, and then you screw all these in extremely tight so that they won't move, and then you get this actuator that moves the assembly. And once I wire it up, I'll show it working in the door with this face off. And now I just have to find this second little screw hole back here, which again, the easiest way to do it is just take another one of these, line it up over that screw hole there, and then push your drill bit down through that second back hole here by my thumb, and drill a hole, and make sure that these two are lined up. Don't have them like that or like this. Make sure that the necks are extended so that you can compare them, and line that up perfectly over the X of the screw, and drill your second hole, which should line up perfectly with the one behind it, or close enough that you'll catch the threads, and it will be held in place. Just 2 screws, and cut that one little cable, that's it, or a little metal connector. For wiring the entire assembly into your vehicle and finding out that something is wrong with it there, and then having to fish all the wires back out, if you have a battery or a jumper, you can use this to test the system first. And I didn't really splice these, they're just sitting there, so it will have a really weak signal and the battery's not that strong, but it'll at least let you see the solenoid working its job. And that's it. The end of the project wiring, or what I'm saving for the end, is the engine bay end of wiring. I do things a little bit cleaner, so I like to go a little bit extra further and get some extra stuff. This is, I think, a 10 gauge wire that I'm putting in a sleeve, which I think the sleeves you can get at like Harbor Freight or most stores that sell them for a couple bucks. and I'm going to attach this to the battery terminal. This is a much greater gauge than I need to supply for the motors. However, it's going to go, I'm going to put this little connector on it with these little guys, crimp it on, and attach it to the positive. But what I'm going to do is bring it over to this side, and you can see I've fed it up into the wire loom all the way across. And I'll probably put a couple zip ties on there and then trim them off so it just blends in with it, and it doesn't look like there's any extra weird wiring going on. And then when it comes over to here, this end here, I'm going to put another cap on, this one, which is a much smaller hole, which will then connect to this, which will allow me to have 4 circuits that will all have fuses, and it has a weatherproof cap for it. So this I can then mount into my engine bay and then attach not only the power window or power motors, but anything else that I do. If I ever do accessory lights and whatnot, I'll already have a better place to attach them than over on the terminal of the battery. It gets to be a pain when you attach lots of things to your battery and then you have to remove your battery or remove a terminal just for some reason, for changing the airbag or something in the steering wheel that involves the airbag and having to disconnect and making it difficult. So this allows me to move all of those components further away. And then it also allows me to remove all of these. I hate inline fuses. If you ever blow one, you have to go hunt down those damn things. And I prefer fuses in fuse banks like this. So you just snip this off, leave that, but take the, I mean, you might use it for something else someday, but snip it off here and just take the fuse, put it in the bank that you're going to connect this wire to. Then I'll just connect this wire to that red fused bank there, so it's the 10 amp fuse, and then that will be wired in to the battery through this, and it will be complete. The other part is this device itself, where you have to feed this wire loom, which is extremely long. Make sure you keep it untangled and straight, so the longer area you can lay it out, it makes it easier. When that comes through the firewall here, I'm probably going to use a pre-existing hole if I can find one, like this one here. This rubber grommet can fit some more wire through it. There's another one right under it. Those are just weatherproofing seals for your firewall. But make sure it's sealed once you're done. You don't want it to have a new hole in there that leaks water into your cab. So this is the wiring from the driver's side door where it's going to have to come in. And there is no grounding screw on this one, but traditionally I believe the TJs right up in here have a grounding screw. So it's not a bad idea. You can place one there or wherever you feed the wire through. I'm probably going to feed it through this lower one. Wherever you feed your wire loom through, make sure you tuck it up and strap it up in here because your pedals are right here and you would not want a wire falling down in where your pedals are. So make sure you zip tie it all, make sure it's very tight, and then you run your wire in here. Find a good grounding spot. Any of these body surface areas up there, there's some really nice bolts that you could probably use. But find a good grounding surface. Usually interior is what I do, just so it doesn't have the ability to erode. Because if it gets rusty, then it will stop grounding and it will short out and you won't be able to use your locks. But that's all the rest of it. This is the wiring in the engine bay completed, except for plugged in over there. It's plugged into the positive terminal over here, fed behind. If I can get refocused out of the sunlight there, it pops up behind your computer. Runs up and around. Main wiring harness, got a couple of zip ties that I snipped off to get it all nice and clean, so it looks as original as possible. And again, comes in here, goes down and behind this sidewall here, and then attaches to this little fuse bank that I mounted onto the surface here. It's 2 screws. I drilled 2 holes. It's sturdy on there. Has this weatherproofing, and it sits tall in the engine bay, so if I'm ever in water, it won't be down on this platform, which sometimes can take on water. Same with the actual unit itself. The back of the unit is actually exposed, so I used electrical tape to semi-weatherproof it because I wash my Jeep with a garden hose, so when it gets clean, it's not that careful about keeping electronics safe. And then I fit it into the upper gasket here on the firewall compared to the lower one that I did on the other Jeep, because this one had more space, and then I also fed the tube in through the wire casing so that it would keep weatherproof. I'm going to seal this up with some gum. or some silicone of some kind, just so I don't get water in the cab. But that's all this. I just have to attach this to the 10 amp fuse right there, and if I ever blow a fuse, pop that right off, and I've got my fuses for any other peripherals that I want to add as well. And then that comes in down through here, and that's the whole wiring harness. You just have to feed one set of blue and green wires all the way up and under the dash assembly. You can feed it up without actually taking off any body panels, and then take off the glove box, which comes off fairly easily. And then the 5-color harness comes over here to the door on the driver's side, so that you can have controllers and stuff. I leave the white and brown wires unplugged because those are buttons, so that you can control it via button internally of the cab. I only use the remote features currently. I do have those wired in, but I'm not interested in using them currently. So the driver's side door, although it passes its harness forward with its 5 wires, I'm actually only using 3 of them, which is the green, the blue, and the black, which is the ground that goes into the door, which I'm sure is actually for that button again, so you could probably get away with just 2. But I just wired them all in because. Now at the end here, this is what you'll be left with. You've got one 5-pin, which again, the brown and the white are disconnected further up, just in case I ever choose to put the switch in the vehicle. It allows me to do it, otherwise I'm just going to use this button. And then there's the end that comes off the door, which is very long, but that's just so that if this door strap breaks and the door swings all the way out, it won't rip the wires out of either end. So it's just a safety precaution. And then I'm just going to tuck it up around this peg before the strap, so that it has a place that catches it, and the strap can go on there to work together. And then I'll have to set this down for a second. Now with the new door locks, it's currently locked on the fob. Hit the unlock button, unlocks it, pops right open. And with it open, there is the wiring harness. The other one I actually wove it up through this thing, the door retaining strap, but this one I didn't. I didn't really care. Don't need to make it look that pretty for mine. But yeah, that's it all tucked up. The wires all the way to the other side are all tucked in. And shut it and lock.